Welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast, where we serve and support leaders so you can serve and support your local church.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Olson. Well, in our countdown to the conference, I'm really excited to share one of our 2022 Overflow Worship Conference guests with you. Now, if you were at the conference in 2021, you already know him. McKendree Tucker had probably our most attended sessions of the conference because he was talking about leading the band with excellence. And he also just gave incredible wisdom on how to grow in our role as band members. And we were honestly amazed at how much people wanted to learn more about this topic. And so we brought him back because it was kind of by popular demand. And so I'm really excited to share a conversation with you today that we had in preface to the conference. And I'm excited for you to get to know him a little bit better. So without any further delay, I want to welcome McKendree Tucker to the podcast. Thank you so much for being with me here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Glad to be here. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, well, we're honored to have you. So for those of you who were not at the Overflow Worship Conference in 2021, I actually literally just looked up at my calendar and was like, yeah, 2021 was last year. And we're in 2022. It just feels like some things are a blur. But for those of you who are listening who weren't there, you missed out because McKendree was with us and was an amazing leader of our band and just taught some amazing sessions. But for those who weren't there, McKendree, tell everyone just a little bit about you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm McKendree Tucker. I am a producer, songwriter. For years, for the past probably 9 or 10 years, I was a full-time touring musician, traveling musician. And I did that with several different artists. Most recently, my longest bit of touring was with Carrie Job, and I was her keyboard player and MD for years. And that was a wonderful, extremely wonderful experience. I wouldn't have traded that for the world. It was awesome, but I now have 3 kids, three little kids.
Yeah.
And so life is amazing and adventurous, and it's awesome. And my wife and I just decided that this is a good time for me to come off the road. I actually stepped down January, February of 21 as well. And I came off road and started doing full-time producing, and I do a lot of songwriting as well. And yeah, God has been so faithful and so good. And in fact, we met through songwriting, didn't we, Andrea?
We did. Yes.
And so that was pretty cool to see this relationship grow and to see how that kind of started really and truly in the transition area of me coming off the road and going into this full time. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
God is good.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And yeah, it was cool because I had been talking with Meredith, and she was like, yeah, we're going to write with this guy named McKendree, and he's so great. Like, she was, excited for us to meet because you guys were, are on worship team together at church, right? Mm-hmm. And
yes.
And so we just popped on Zoom, and because COVID had just hit, and I was supposed to be in person, but then I was like, I guess not. Guess we're not flying to Nashville. And I just we popped on Zoom, and it was one of those like, nice to meet you. and
I don't know about you, but I never heard of Zoom until the pandemic hit. I mean, like, I just didn't do a lot of, I did FaceTime, but I'd never heard of Zoom. And all of a sudden, Zoom is everything now.
I know. It's crazy. Well, and the only reason that, I had is because Overflow Worship is a, organization that has team members all over the country. And so we had used Zoom for a while. But yeah, I know for a lot of people, it was just one of those like, okay, this is a whole new world. But
it is. Yeah.
That's how my first single in 7 years came to be was Monument on Zoom with you and Meredith. So it was worth it.
I don't think I realized it was the first in 7 years. That's awesome. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a really special song. So, and like you said, the rest is history. It's cool to see how God orchestrated things from there. And here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yes. So, I would love to just talk a little bit about, when you were at the conference last year, we addressed a lot of things from the keyboard player's perspective, from the MD perspective, the musical director perspective. And that was, I didn't realize what a big topic that was going to be. I don't know if you remember in that session that we did with all four of us teaching. And once we started talking about musical directing, it was like, everyone was like, okay, wait, tell me more about that. Tell me more about what that looks like. How do we integrate that? How do we use that? So for people who are listening, who, weren't at the conference or they're new to the Overflow worship community, maybe would you give just like a short little overview of what does a musical director do in the church, volunteer supported context?
Yes. Awesome. Yeah. I was actually blown away as well at last year's conference at all the questions that were coming in about roles of an MD. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that really sticks out to me is that a lot of churches are growing and progressing, and also the music within the church is growing. And as the technology grows. And so an MD is so important as that keeps growing. But yes, an MD, music director, is really what it says. It is like an MD at a church is in control of the band. First off, they are kind of the translation piece between a worship leader and a band, or at least it can be. And like when a worship leader wants to go certain places, wants to transition from song to song, wants to go even dynamically in places, the instruction can be given a lot of times to the music director, and the music director's job is to always keep an eye on what the worship leader is doing, and then translating that, whether it's through a talkback mic, but a lot of churches don't have talkback mics. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's through signals, hand signals. Maybe it's through facial motions. Like you can kind of get experimental with it, or it's if the MD is a keyboard player, it can be literally as you're playing, you're guiding musically where we need to go. So I guess I would say an MD is the mouthpiece of direction for the worship leader to communicate with the band without the worship leader breaking from what they're doing and telling the band exactly what to do.
Before we get to the rest of today's episode, I'm so excited to tell you that book 3 of our children's book series, The Big God Books, is out. If you didn't know, my husband, Gabe Olson, and I, Andrea Olson, co-authored a children's book series. Book 1 and 2 came out in the end of 2021 and early 2022. But now, the long-awaited book 3 is called A Little Love, and it is out now. You can get it through Amazon. You can get it on our website. We'll put the links in the show notes, but we're so excited to tell you about these books. Our hope and prayer is that they will help you continue or start the conversation about miracles with your kids in your homes. Check it out at thebiggodbooks.com. We had a lot of people, and I've worked with a lot of churches where, they themselves, as the worship leader, are the musical director. Mm-hmm. And just, because of personnel and that kind of thing. So I guess my first question would be, how can they navigate through that? Like, what are some things that they could do as the worship leader and the musical director to communicate with the band, like with ease? And maybe, like you say, it's hand signals, but like, are there things to set in place in rehearsal so that, they're kind of set up for success when they're actually in the service?
Yeah, no, I think what you said is definitely a good step. Understanding the hand signals of the worship leader, but a lot of that has to do with talking to them beforehand, understanding what their signals mean, or like even breaking it down to what's your signal for chorus? Maybe it's this, maybe it's something else. What's your signal for the turnaround or for the top of the song? When I was, a lot of times when I first joined with Carrie, a lot of times her signal for the top of the song would be this. And so as she's singing, she would kind of do this and touch her head. And that meant, hey, she wants to like go revisit that first verse, the top of the song. She wants to, like, after a first verse and chorus, she really wants to get the congregation into that first verse again. Maybe she didn't feel like it really, set in, and she wants to grow that a little more. So like a lot of times it's that. So yeah, I would say really get, for the MD, I mean, really and truly the whole band, it would be helpful for them to understand as well, but specifically for the MD to understand maybe hand signals. What's a bridge? I mean, I play with worship leaders. Andrea, I can't remember what your hand signal is for bridge, but I play with people where they literally do this for bridge.
Like make a bridge with their hand.
I understand that, but it's kind of hard to do.
Right.
But that's a thing, like bridge, sometimes that's bridge,
Sure.
you can, yeah. And so like, definitely understanding like hand signals if the worship leader is doing a lot of the directing.
Yeah.
If they're like, I don't really know where I want to go until I'm there leading the song, then it's important for both the worship leader and the MD to be on the same page as far as hand signals go. Also, a lot of prep beforehand. I can't stress this enough, and this is an area that I've had to grow into over the years, is when you show up, especially every Sunday morning when the set list is always different. When you show up as an MD, you've got to be familiar with the songs.
Yeah.
You got to know, like, a lot of times the worship leader is wanting to do exactly the way that Hillsong did the song, or like they want to go through the exact format. And if you're the MD and you don't know that, you don't know the format, so like prep work is definitely a big deal. But just a lot of beforehand talking through, hey, like when you say chorus, like what's your signal for chorus? What's this? Do you want to should we always try to do a double chorus, or do you want to keep it just one chorus?
Yes. Communication.
Clear communication. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, so a lot of times, and I don't know if you've seen this too in the various scenarios you've worked in, but in the local church context, especially when it's volunteer supported, a lot of times I hear from worship leaders that like, it's really hard to hand off this musical direction piece. Like, I don't know if I could. I don't know if there's anybody who is, like ready for that, because it is, in its entirety. I mean, when you showed up at the conference, like your job was big. You had done a lot of prep work, and it's big. So let's say that there is a talented young, teenager or college age student on your team that isn't ready for like what you did, but they could do something. And the worship leader, it would make some part of it easier. And they kind of want to train someone up in musical directing. What's the first step to, trying to bring them into that role?
Yeah, I would kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, or the last step is preparing them, allowing them to really be familiar with maybe even a handful of songs that you think you'll always do, and get them super familiar with it, and then also I love the whole concept of rehearsing creativity. And it's never a bad idea, even if it's not a worship service. You literally, it's a worship leader and a keyboard player or somebody who's training to be an MD. You just, hey, let's just play through the song, and I'm just going to sing it, and I'm going to kind of just go places, and you work on like flowing together. Like I feel like you can never go wrong with rehearsing creativity. Just like practice it. We have to practice it, everything else, right?
Yeah.
Why not practice it that together? And so worship leaders, if you are training up newer people, and even, people who are kind of new to this or wanting to learn more about it, don't be afraid to, yes, give instruction and give the prepared materials and, make sure there's ample time for them to listen through all the songs and stuff, but also just spend time rehearsing it. Even take a day and just, even if it's not specifically for a set list for a Sunday or a Wednesday night service or something, you're literally just rehearsing that.
Yeah.
That idea of flowing together, which is ultimately how a band creates such good chemistry over time, is they're constantly rehearsing,
That's so good. And so that brings me to a different question. And actually, I didn't even think of this beforehand, but I feel like this podcast is going to turn into like a crash course for worship keyboardists. We'll just maybe cover like a gamut of different topics. But you said rehearse creativity, and that made me think of this whole concept of like planned spontaneity, because I have a lot of people ask me like, okay, so when we're free flowing in the Spirit, or if we want to grow in that, how do we do that? Because there's this kind of misconception that it's like, well, you just do it. Like all of a sudden, McKendree is an incredible keyboard player. And yes, the Holy Spirit can do anything. Like he imparts incredible things. But also there's that preparation and the back work that, we need to be ready so that we can go where he leads us to go.
Yeah.
But
True.
I know a teeny tiny bit of what you've told me about your background in church, and it was more of like a Pentecostal upbringing. Is that right?
Charismatic, yes.
Charismatic,
yeah. Same thing. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
So let me ask you that. So what does that look like from your perspective for somebody if they came to you and said like, hey, as a keyboard player, I want to be able to flow with a spontaneous worship leader? Like, how do I even begin to think about preparing for that?
That's a great question. And I feel like it can be broken down into a few different ways. One in particular being to really, this is getting a little technical, but like if you're a keyboard player and say you're in one key and you're playing with this worship leader, it's really important to really understand the limitations of that key. So like what you're playing in, like say, just make sure without a shadow of a doubt what you can and can't play in that key. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that is taken care of so you can flow wherever you want to flow. Also, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but like they're just having that prep work done of understanding the songs, understanding the flow. I will say, in my experience, because I was raised in a charismatic church, we did some hymns, but we didn't do a lot of hymns. And so I definitely was raised with not a very good knowledge of how to play hymns. And so over the years, I've had to kind of work at it. I've had to learn hymns. And I remember even before playing shows, being like, well, I want to learn this hymn just in case, this very popular hymn.
Wow.
Like End Well or something, or Blessed Assurance or something like that. I make sure I know how to play that song. At least I know the basics of how to play it in case for some reason we go into that song. That helps the flow.
Yeah.
Because say at the end of Holy Spirit, the worship leader wants to go into It Is Well, or something, to kind of like tie a bow around what they're singing. And you need to know at least the basics of that. And that's something I had to work, with and work at for years. But in order to really like understand how to flow with the worship leader, it's just continuing to just like over time practice together, and be open, whenever you're playing with them in a live setting, to make sure you have patience. Patience has been the key for me over the years, just kind of waiting. Like it's okay to kind of sit too and just wait and see where they want to go flow wise.
Yeah, that's so good. And so when you say understand the limitations of the key, you mean like that one is major, two is minor, three, like that
Exactly.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Although, where are the sharps? Where are the flats
Yeah.
in the key? Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which, I think it's easy to say if you're a keyboard player playing the church service, you probably have a good understanding of that. But maybe you have a good understanding of that. Maybe you have a good understanding of that in just one or two keys.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, transposing can be amazing on a keyboard, and it can help save you
Yes.
in a lot of awkward times for sure. But the best thing to do is just to be at least decently comfortable in all the keys.
Yeah.
Whenever I joined Carrie, just to explain about that for a second, this was early 2014. Up until that point, I had never really played in the key of A flat. I never really had a reason to.
Oh, and she does a lot of A flat, doesn't she?
Oh my goodness. A bunch of her songs, at least then.
Yeah.
Lately, the last album or so, it's been a little different. It's been it hasn't been as much, but for those first several albums that she did, a lot of her songs were in A flat. And I remember before I got the gig, when they were considering me, I remember just practicing over and over and over playing in A flat. Now it's one of the keys I actually love playing in A flat because I feel super comfortable now, but I didn't. It was me actually working on it and getting familiar with it.
Yes. Yeah. When I was in college, I went to a conservatory, so it was very classical focused. It was piano performance. But when I was there, they were just starting a school of worship as well. And it was kind of like this new concept of like, whoa, that was it was 2003 when I started college. And, but there was a professor in the School of Worship who was this incredible piano player, jazz, like any genre you can imagine. He was just incredible. And so I took additional lessons from him. And I remember he had me learn all the chord scales. And so he would have me play these exercises where I would just play broken triads with octaves in the bass and all the way up every single key. And at the time I was like, this is so lame. Like, why am I doing this? But it's genius because I have no question at all what chord is what in any key because of him. So it's those.
That was genius. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was those practice, like you said, you put in the time and it's worth it. It takes intentionality. It makes me think of, we have a podcast that we released recently with this guy named Jay Messer, and he said, we were talking in regards to leadership, but it applies here so well. But he said, you're perfectly positioned to get the results you're currently getting. Like you're perfectly, and I was like, what?
That's
whoa. Great. And it's true. And so for all the keyboard players and worship leaders, anybody out there listening, it's like there's a lot of intentionality and time and hard work that has to go in behind the scenes to position us, to get results. And if we're not, we're going to get results that are indicative of that too.
Yes. Like I remember that kind of reminds me of years ago. Probably 2007, 2008, 2009. I remember playing for a worship artist that he had me running tracks while I was MDing, but he also had there were moments in the set where there were little loop points. I was running Logic and there were little loop points where you could kind of drag a loop up. And they were pre-planned loops that if he gave a certain signal, there was a certain hand signal, going back to the hand signals, there was a certain hand signal he would give while he's worshiping the song, while he's leading the song. If he gave that signal, that was my cue that for that moment, wherever we were in the tracks, I would loop that section and there would be this loop that would happen. So it was almost like this planned spontaneity.
Yep.
That we had. And it was great because sometimes he would use it and sometimes he wouldn't. It just depends on where he felt like the Holy Spirit was going.
Yeah.
And he would feel like, I really want to just loop this part per section,
Yeah.
and so yeah, it was good to understand and to know all of that in order for there to be this atmosphere of leading the music and leading the worship where the leader wanted to go.
Yeah. Yes. And being
Awesome.
prepared for that. Before we get to the rest of today's episode, I want to tell you about Growth Roots Co. My goodness, they have been such a blessing to me on my journey. I got to tell you what, this journal, so it's a journal, and it's not just like your run-of-the-mill journal with lines and blank paper. This is a guided experience that encourages you to pen your prayers, encourages you to keep record of the miracles that God has done in your life, keep record of your prayer requests, and set goals. And it's just such an amazing tool for you on your spiritual journey. And I know that it has been for mine. I absolutely love my Growth Roots journal. So I couldn't wait to tell you about it. You can get all the information, see all the different colors and products that they offer at growthrootsco.com. And right now, listeners can get 10% off their first order with code Overflow Worship. So head on over to Growth Roots Co. right now and get your journal. They just came out with some new colors recently, and they are awesome. All right, back to today's episode. Like I said before, I think there's just this misconception that like it just happens, but it's actually that we have to be prepared so that it can just happen,
Right.
like put the loop in or play that chorus again and you feel comfortable to go there, yeah. So with that, I know a follow-up question that somebody will email and ask, so I'll just ask it, is with tracks, like, is that a common method to throw a loop into Logic, or like how do people incorporate spontaneity easily within the track grid? My reference is Logic. I have Ableton. I need to teach it to myself. I just haven't yet. So I have a tiny bit of knowledge of how it works. But that's a common pain point. And so, if I tell people like the easiest thing is to, run your track and then, plan your spontaneity in the transition when there is no track. Like that's your loop space. So then you don't have to worry about like in the track. But how does it work from a little more technical standpoint within the track?
Yeah. Well, I will say, so I do all my recording and stuff in Logic, but it's been a while since I've done tracks in Logic, because I will say Ableton kind of seems to be the champ in the world of running tracks. Whenever we did it with Carrie, it was set up a little differently. Usually, I think the most standard way that a lot of people do it is you would do this song, right, with the track. And then usually at the end of the song, the click would just be on loop, and the click would keep looping.
Oh, okay.
And so as a band, you could go anywhere you wanted to after the actual track song would be finished. You could just loop the click and always have the click going.
Yeah.
And then as an MD, you could direct wherever you wanted the band to go, whether we go back into a big chorus or what. But there are, this is getting a little more technical, but there are parameters you can set up within Ableton and Logic as well. But I think it's a little more set up in Ableton to do this. So, but you can set up to where, like at our church, at the Belonging, we have a guy on staff who his job is he's like the track guy, and he literally preps and gets all the sessions ready. And he has it set up to where we have an iPad, and the iPad speaks to Ableton, and there's literally buttons. There's a button for every single section. There's verse 1, chorus 1, verse 2, chorus 2, bridge, et cetera, et cetera. And so literally right before the bar ends on that whole phrase, you can click that button and it'll take you back to the chorus.
Okay.
Take you back to the verse. You can do that. You can do that manually too, like what we used to do in Logic years ago. You can do all that manually. It's a little more, it's a little harder because you're playing too. So
just
to click a button is really easy. But that's one way. That's definitely the more technical way that once you set it all up, it's not technical. It's very simple. But it just takes a little time to get all that set up. But once it's set up, it's actually beautiful. Whenever I run tracks at church, it's so easy, and it gives a lot of freedom.
Yeah,
you can, even if you're sticking, like say you finish the whole song, and the song is done, and then you're like, it's just a click looping, and you're revisiting the chorus a few times. And then you build on the chorus really big, really big, really big. And then say you wanted to go into chorus 2 full on, like full band, but you also wanted to bring in the tracks.
Yeah.
Well, there's a button that, because the click is looping, you just hit the button for the chorus 2 full band, and then it goes to that track, and then tracks are in. So it feels like, like it's like everybody's playing those parts, but it's really the tracks helping you out that you're bringing back into the picture.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. I think that would open up a lot more flexibility for a lot of people, who feel kind of stuck inside the grid of the track. But like you said, it's a more technical and a little bit more, it takes somebody who can pay attention to it. Like the worship leader shouldn't be doing that and being the MD and leading worship, know?
Right. You're right. I know there's a lot of people out there who do that, though.
They do.
Much respect to you.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Oh, yeah,
but yes,
for sure.
Ideally, yes.
I remember one time, this was like, I don't know, this was more than 10 years ago. It was a long time ago. I was just experimenting with main stage. And so it took the regular, I think it was like a Korg keyboard. I took that off the stage and I put my MIDI controller, on the stage. I was going to lead worship. And, but I had routed loops, because I don't know what kind of loops we needed, but I had routed loops to the bottom 2 keys on the piano, because I never play them, right? So I could just if I needed it.
Yeah.
And I totally bumped it. And so I think my husband was back at the soundboard, and he was quick trying to pull it out, and I was like, oh my goodness, that is me trying to do too many things.
Oh, I've definitely been there. That's awesome.
I maxed out my brain capacity, apparently. So anyways, well, this has just been so fun and so helpful. And I think a lot of people listening will glean a lot of helpful information about, what it looks like to be a supportive MD and a supportive keyboard player, and what we can do to prepare. And I think the common thread I've heard from you is be prepared.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you're only setting yourself up for more and more success the more prepared you are. At least if you have an understanding of what's to be expected or of what you can do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, McKendree, you recently put out your own project, a solo project, right? And
yes.
I was so excited because your wife posted on Instagram about it, and I was like, what? Well, I'm going to download this right now and share it with everyone I know. So I would love it if you would just tell people a tiny bit about that project, maybe the inspiration behind it and where they can find it.
Yes, of course. Thank you. I think over the years of being a touring musician and with being a producer and songwriter, it's very easy to get caught up into making and creating music for other people, which is amazing, which is beautiful. I love doing that. But at the same time, there's always these melodies and these songs that's from my heart that I wanted to share from me. And over time, I kind of let that go. And so if anybody's out there listening to this and you feel like there's music you want to put out, but you just haven't had the time, I want to encourage you that there is time for you to carve for it. There is time for you to carve out and just do it. Because what I did, I was talking to my wife, Rachel, and I was like, I just need to put this out there. And what it is it's just a collection of 5 short little musical pieces that are all focused around the piano. It's called Una Vita for the piano, which in Latin means a life. And so it's this series that I have, and there's going to be more series coming after it. But this is the first one I wanted to do. And what it is it's little snapshots. It's literally all one takes of me either sitting down at my keyboard here or on the road, and I would capture it. But I would just sit down, and whether it's a hard time I was going through or a nostalgic time I was going through, or maybe a joyful time that I was going through, and I just wanted to take a little snapshot, and I would record these melodies. And so it's like a collection of a few different snapshots of my life. And it's put into this, and there's a little bit of production on them, but very minimal. And yeah, so that's it's on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, wherever. It's McKendree. It's under my name, McKendree, and it's called Una Vita for piano.
Amazing. Well, I loved it when I listened to it. And it's actually like I have been on the search for like just calming piano music that is just like that. And so when it came out, I didn't even need to listen to it before I got excited because I knew it was going to be great, but it is really good. So everybody go look up McKendree on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you listen and check it out because it's really good. So thanks for sharing your art with us because it's a blessing to so many.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, McKendree, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And I just look forward to all that is to come. And thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It was an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Anytime.
You've been listening to the Overflow Worship Podcast. If you enjoy our podcast, please take a moment and leave us a 5-star rating and a written review, which helps us reach more people. New episodes are released every other Monday. So until next time, thank you for listening.